Welcome back to Hardware Synthesizers with Church Tech FAQ. We're going to go a little deeper and a little more hands-on with hardware synthesizers today with Robert Delahunt. I'm super excited to have him here and to talk through what we can do with hardware instead of having to spend massive amounts of money on software setups. So this video, we're talking through 5 tips on hardware synths. We're going to be customizing sounds. We're going to be talking about additional features like arpeggiators and sequencers. We're going to maybe talk about some beginner's mistakes and how to avoid that in a worship setting. We want to talk about choosing the right synth. So if you are going to move into a hardware synth, what should you be looking for? And then lastly, we just want to point to some additional resources if this is piquing your interest. We want to see where we can go to learn more. So, first topic, first question. So when we're customizing synth sounds, like what parameters should a beginner start with, and why are those parameters important? Like, how does it work?
Okay, I'll just go through basics, yeah. And honestly, we're gonna link to, I think we're also gonna link to Michael DeLay, or I can't remember his name, but his last name is DeLay, which is sort of ironic, but
That's
Sound
great.
on Sound has got an amazing tutorial on how synthesizers work from the ground up. Very easy to understand. He does a great job with it, so I'd recommend those videos. We'll put in the description, I think, yeah. Sound on Sound. But basically, let's say I'm starting out with a patch. On my System 8, I'm gonna pull up a patch that's default, so that y'all can hear how it sounds. There we go, Random Sparks, which is my favorite keyboard sound by far. So a couple of notes, starting off. First of all, the octave's not high enough for playing in church. All right, so let's say I loaded up that one patch that I just talked about, and the octave was too low. I want a little bit more, that's just me, I want more space, so I'm gonna go octave up. Sounds beautiful, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, it's got a lot of pitch wobble, and so if I'm playing this with other musicians, I'm gonna run into the problem of it clashing a little bit too much, or dominating too much. I mean, if this was all we had in the song, then it'd be fine by itself. But it's a bit too big. So a couple of ways to do that on this synth. Specifically, if you hold Shift and go into the LFO section, you can see what's plus and minus. So I'll back up and explain. Basically, a synthesizer. The signal path more or less goes like this. First, you have oscillators, which are simply electronic components that make the sound. They generate the sound,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have that. Then second of all, it'll go through several different phases before it finally comes out the other end. So first of all, we can control what voice it has before we start shaping it. Second part you have is called a local frequency or a low frequency oscillator or local frequency oscillator. But basically, so we have our oscillators make the sound. The low frequency oscillator basically allows us to provide changes in how it sounds. The best way to demonstrate that would actually be to go into a manual mode. But it's for now. You can almost hear it. There's too much pitch wobble. Yeah. It does sound good, but it's just too much pitch wobble. So what I can do is I can bring that down to only a +4 wobble, and that'll sort of clean it out a little bit, or iron it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Now this patch is one of my favorites because if you're doing prayer stuff or quiet, stuff, it's got a lot of sustain, so it almost functions like its own pad.
Yeah.
But it does sound 80s. From there, other than oscillators, now you have, because there's on this one there are 3 at least. There's 1, 2, and then 3, which sort of functions as a sub or can be subbed in as a third oscillator. But then you also have the ability to mix those. So in terms of mixing how much of each of those you're getting. And again, it's going to get complex, so I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. You also usually have a noise. I'm going to okay, it's a 6.
Okay.
You can mix in noise if you want, different types of noise as well. But for the most part, this patch doesn't have any of that. So that's really off. But yeah, you can mix that in if you want. It does help make pads sound more atmospheric in some ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like in video editing, everything is digital these days, but you can add film grain back to make it look like it was shot on film, and people just perceive it as being more real looking.
Yeah.
Because that's what film looks like. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you got that option, and then from there, it's going to go through several other stages. Not every synthesizer has some of these components, so just keep that in mind. The System 8 has a pitch section where you can actually control, like, say you wanted a bell, like a crush bell, or a type of bell that sounds like it's off pitch at the beginning, like you've heard some of them, right? Where they're like slightly off pitch at the beginning, and then it like narrows out. That's one of the things you could possibly do with the pitch oscillator on here, or you can just use it to help control other parameters. Then you have a filter section. Remember when I was like sweeping the pads around on that song by Phil Wickham?
Yeah.
I'm using the high pass and low pass filters. They sound like they're backwards in the way they get used, but basically here's how this works. At the filter section, you have the ability to run like a, like some bells when you like trigger them, like they're really sharp at the beginning, like really bright, and then it like mellows out.
Yeah.
You can use a filter section to do that.
Okay.
But then also, while I was playing the pads, I was mainly adjusting the low-pass filter. Low-pass filters allow low information, low frequencies to come out, and they like cut out the highs. So you're actually adjusting the highs with the low-pass filter. It sounds like it's backwards, but it's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
It's more like sound engineering mentality. So like one of the main things I'll do with pads, for example, like on this one. I can bring the high pass up, so I have more brights, or I can bring it down during a prayer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Brought it back down too far.
That's okay.
There we go, right? And I'm just using that to show you real quick. So then you have the high pass filter as well, and that allows highs through, so you're cutting out the bass. So say you don't want like a really saturated, like really, really big. There's some songs where like they have like the high, like ethereal pads at the beginning. What you can do is you can basically cut the basses all the way out, and like bring as much of it as you want in.
Yeah.
And of course, then you can play with them as the song's going along. So I'm bringing the high pass filter back out, and then I can bring the low pass filter back down, just sort of mute it down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can do a lot of really amazing things with synths in the live.
Yeah, because that's just one patch.
Yeah, that's just one patch.
You're just changing the frequencies that you're allowing through.
Yeah, just
you've
one
got
patch.
all those sounds. That's cool.
Yeah, and since the system one comes with that patch, that's why I recommend it, because like you basically have all the pads you'll ever need for the most part just with that one. It sounds so good.
Yeah.
But another thing you can do is, like on this one, you can map that to your controller. So that actually helps in the live, and I'll show that in a second, to like basically be able to just reach over and grab something. But you have your filter section, which has a lot of different options I don't have time to go over, but mainly your high pass and low pass filters are what you're going to play with. And then on your amp filter, that's actually going to be one of the primary places you play also. For example, and we showed that on the patch edit for this one. Your attack, you have these sliders called ADSR, attack, delay, sustain, release. Your attack helps you in terms of like how things come in. Let's say, and I'm going to have to probably demonstrate with this one because I have something loaded up on the System 8 I want to use.
Sure.
Let's say we have our pads, right? Maybe bring it up an octave. Well, what I can do, let's say I want it to come in really slowly after pastor starts preaching. I'm going to bring the attack all the way up. It's going to take a while to come in.
Yeah.
And then once it comes in that small fade, I can just bring it back to where I had it and do what I need to do.
Okay.
Delay is more for like bells, in the sense that the delay is like when you like first hit the key, how long it sustains, when like first hit it.
Yeah.
So like for bells, if you want it to just like blink, so I do something like this. I know it's a coarse demonstration, but now the thing is, it will let go though. Once I let go of the keys, the delay will actually let go. So let's say you want to do bells. A typical filter setup for bells would be sort of like this, where it's like low attack, high delay, low sustain, and then about an average release. Right?
Yeah.
Because then you're hearing it like after I let go, release is letting go of the key, how long does it last? So in the sense of like, okay, let's say I want to do keys. It's just a basic key, but I turn the release all the way off. Say I want it that way, that's fine. I can have it that way.
Yeah.
Let's say I want it to have a little bit more release. Just bring the slider up. So you can really customize how it sounds in worship, because again, you don't want like, you ever seen those pads where like you play it, but it takes forever to blossom or whatever you want to call it, to be there, right?
Yeah.
And you also, so that would be like a more of a amp filter attack problem.
Okay.
But let's also say, like, you want something to last a long time after the release, you can also like just modify that. So again, customizable. There's a lot of pads that I use in worship that like the stock patch was like, it wasn't gonna work because of things like that, like too much attack, too much delay or whatever. And so I just adjust it, save it. Now I've got something that works great for worship.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool.
I think I may have forgotten to mention something though.
Yeah.
The effects can be important. I remember like this one had a lot of delay at the end. I'll bring it back and then try it like this. See, I feel like there's still too much delay. Like that's an effect, I can turn that down. But let's say I also want like lots of reverb. I can bring that up. Right? Because a lot of pads, what you hear is like, it's not necessarily that you hear the oscillators. You hear a lot of like chorus and like reverb. So yeah, it's actually one of the most popular effects pedals. If you, for example, to run with a synthesizer, is like a really nice, really big delay. So it just depends on what you need.
Right. Very cool. What are some other features that a hardware synth might have besides filters? So we know everything starts with oscillators generating sounds, and then you run it through filters to get the sound you want. What are some other features that might be useful?
Okay, well, there's also this sequencer. We're going to just briefly touch on that one. But basically, a sequencer is sort of like being able to program, almost like a player piano, like program notes into it. I think the System 8 has 100 positions total, and they can have multiple notes. Like the default sequencer that comes with this patch sounds like this. Right? That could be something you run like as a loop. I don't necessarily do it that way, but there are settings, or there are times in worship where that's actually like very useful. Let's see if I can find it. I think it was the Juno 106. Like if you can imagine this one in the background, like as you're playing King of Kings. I think there's like, I can't remember which track it is, maybe Keys 3, where there's like just one of those soft pedal pads going on like that.
Yeah.
There you go, set it, and then you don't have to worry about, like in church, you don't have to play anything else. Just let it do its thing.
Right, and you can play on top of that, right?
Oh yeah, I can if I want to, yeah. It probably would end up playing, like in my preference would be I would like then start playing something else on here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that can be set to just sit there and play itself,
Yeah.
or you can play stuff with it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think we were talking before about how like the intro of "This Is Our God" has that big da 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 da, and you can program that into your sequencer, and you can have layers of pads going, and then you just hit start, and that line is playing over top. So you're not trying to run everything everywhere. It just runs itself.
Yeah. But then also, sometimes you want to do that. Let's say, let's go to plug out. Like say I want to use this pad for that song. I could play the lead on top of it and mainly do all my stuff here. That's the beauty of having two, which again, we're not recommending that every church go buy two.
Right.
But like I can have this here like loaded up with whatever like that sound is that I want, and then be playing whatever I need to do from here.
Yeah.
So like following during the verse.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think of possibilities all day long.
Me too.
So I'm the kind of person like, okay, so what if you wanted like a sweeping, a low pass filter or high pass filter while that synth lead is playing? Well, both of your hands are on one. So having your sequencer set to run the lead for you while you're sweeping is another option.
And I put one on here somewhere, so I'm gonna try to find it.
Sure.
Yeah, this is a patch, for example, like House of the Lord by Phil Wickham is some good stuff. I love that song. The problem is, though, I don't think anyone wants to be in a situation where they're almost like a keys monkey, where they're like da-da-da, 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 right? Because if you get the sequence off or like the tempo off, you're like, right?
Right.
Well, sequencer is a great way to like save yourself some carpal tunnel and wrist strain. Is to just to be like, I think it's at like, what tempo is it, like 86? I can filter it down at the beginning. It's like when the band comes in, right?
Yeah.
And then I can bring it back down during the verses, right? Because it's the same sequence. The only thing you'd have to remember is, like, first of all, you need to synchronize your tempo, which is right here. It works. The tempo knob on here is basically like what you'd find on a metronome. It's like it matches.
Yeah.
So and it'll tell you on the screen as you're dialing it in. So I can just dial in 86 or whatever the tempo is on that song, and I'm good. But the issue is like remembering to turn it off. Because that's in live, that's what I've had a problem with, is remembering to reach over. What is that one part in the second verse? He opens prison doors.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Like
God, he holds the victory.
Yeah, that one right there. Yeah, right there in that sequence, I would reach over and hit stop. Right? But then as soon as the chorus comes back in, there's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy. Right? Yeah. The only thing though is like now that's the beauty of interoperating with Ableton. In theory, if you have tracks in Ableton, you can run USB MIDI from whatever the controller is over here, and it will actually track the tempo, which helps then, because then say you accidentally get off, or there's something that happens. Being able to track that way will help you in the sense of like you accidentally hit the start button just a tiny bit off. It's not going to do what you said. It's going to like snap to the tempo, right, and stay on.
Yeah.
In fact, that's how a lot of people who do electronic and DJ stuff do their stuff, is they run everything through MIDI, so that like everything can be on the same page tempo-wise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There are arpeggios, but the thing is, I'll go over them briefly, but I really haven't done much with arpeggios. Like, I'm just being honest.
Sure.
Let's see if I can find one here. I know I had some here somewhere. Usually like towards the back. Maybe it's this one? No, it's not that one. Anyway, well, I might have to do that on a separate video. But basically, the difference between a sequencer and an arpeggiator is, with a sequencer, you just hit start because you programmed the songs into there, right?
Yeah.
The notes that you're going to play. So it's going to like do its job for you. On an arpeggiator, it's different. It's just basically going to take what you're doing and like loop the notes sequentially. So like if you hit a chord, it's going to loop the chords. Again, let me see if I can find one that will work for this. Let's say I want to do bells in church in some sort of arpeggiated way. You can do bells, but again, this is like probably the worst patch to try to demo that with.
That's
so
okay.
I forgot to bring a patch that goes well with that. Maybe we can do that some other time.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So arpeggiators are more you hit your note and it's going to scatter the notes around and put them in its own pattern.
Yeah, but usually on most synths, it's just going to loop through them in a sequence, like not really in a random scatter. But on this one, on the bigger one, the Juno 106 VST does actually have like a random mode. But yeah, for the most part, it's going to be like sequenced. Like, if y'all remember like the Tron Legacy movie, where at the beginning, where he's like driving his motorcycle home, and there's that like sequencing, like you know, like that's going on. That's a perfect example of an arpeggiator.
Okay, very cool. How would you, for someone who's ready to give this a shot, what kind of synth would you start with for worship? Like, how do you choose the right kind of synthesizer for your church?
That's really a difficult question. I struggled with that myself when I started picking synthesizers anyway. I started off with like an Akai mini play or something like that, like a really cheap one to start off, which is not a bad thing. But the default sounds on it just really didn't do well for me. And you didn't have a lot of parameters to like change things. So that was sort of like a problem. So eventually I upgraded to the system one. The thing is, I'm just going to be honest, the people that don't live in like a large metroplex like Dallas, Fort Worth, it's hard to find like stores that have like synthesizers just set up that you can play. Like every once in a while you see that over at like Guitar Center, and like this is not a knock against Guitar Center, I like those people, but
sure.
You know, like there's that one synth that's in like the corner and then like it's been beat up because, you know, kids have been playing on it and stuff.
Right.
So it's like, you know, you don't see a synthesizer very often to try out. I actually basically had to blind test both of these, like, and just like choose them. So, you know, maybe they weren't the perfect choice, but they're decent. There are a lot of good ones out there, so don't get me wrong. I'm not here to say that these are the only ones you need. Korg, I know Korg has some. Novation has some. There are a lot of ones out there that you can look at. I think one of the things that makes it difficult, though, is you just don't know until you get it what the sounds are. Roland has a more, maybe like I would say actually a less rough sound, right? If you want just synthesizers in the raw for like some really raw, beautiful sounding like heavy duty pads, Roland may not be exactly what you want, but it's got some great stuff. I think probably the most raw pad I have is this one. I could sweep it up a little. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the emotive pad on the JX3P, but Roland's still not really gonna be like recognized as like having super rough pads. So like there are other options out there. I think the difficulty also is like how it feels. Case in point, this is the Roland System 1. The controller, you can try it if you want. Like there's no play in the notes. It is like a controller keyboard, like you're playing like Guitar Hero, really.
Yeah.
But, you know, so you don't have any feeling in the keys. So I would have to play, when I first started playing pads, I'd have to like have my left hand on the volume almost all the time, just to like bring it in, like feel it out. So, you know, that's, you know, and then not having a display, you know, the System 1 is a great synth, but that does make it slightly limited. The System 8, however, here has a screen. The problem with this one is there's actually too many patches. There's like 2,000 patches for this thing. You can just like lose your mind trying to find, because there's so many good options, right?
Yeah.
So it really depends on like the needs in church and your budget. Honestly, I still think the Roland System 1 is probably your best entry level for $300, but it's not perfect. And some people don't like the controller keyboard, like the key bed.
Yeah.
There are other ones out there. I did play like a monologue or a mini log in a music store one time, and that one is just like it did sound good, but I didn't like some of the feel to it. That's going to be another thing is like no matter what like synthesizer you're trying out, your own ears are going to tell you whether you like it or not. So,
Right.
you know, and then when you bring it into worship, the difficulty is like, are your ears calibrated to like then know what works good in worship or not? That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of patches on here. I absolutely love how they sound. They sound amazing, but they won't sound good in a band situation. So you sort of have to pick and choose and like sort of understand how things go. Like there's some really like until Phil Wickham came out, for example, like a lot of the trancey stuff just was never done in church. So like at first, I never even put any of those on my loadout because this will hold 64 patches per synth, and there's 4 synths on it. I would never put any stuff like that on here. And then now with Phil Wickham, you know, right? Like now you need all the trance stuff because Phil Wickham's out there, right? So
Yeah.
it's one of those things. It just depends. So choosing a first synth, how do you like things to feel? How do you like things to sound? And then I still recommend trying to like try one out in person, even if you can't afford to, or like if it's like there's not a music store near you. So it's been difficult. But one thing I do want to like make sure people understand. I'm gonna go over to like here's like a Rhodesy sound.
Yeah.
Right? Synthesizers can usually do a great job with that. But like, that's a good one. Like, if you need a piano patch, the synthesizers are not, like a real hardware synthesizer is not gonna be what you want. That's as close as it gets.
Yeah.
That don't sound like a piano, we know, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, but then again, if you want prayer stuff, it's gonna have great electrical keyboards, right?
Right.
So that's the other thing. So like say you have, I'm trying to think of like use cases for worship leaders. Say you have one of those old Yamaha or Korg keyboards at your church that has a good piano sound, right? Mm-hmm. But you're trying to add pads and like the layering just doesn't seem to work for you, layering 2 patches, because when you layer patches, you're getting like the same notes you play on piano as pads, right?
Yeah.
So the difficulty there is your synthesizers won't fill in as pads or as a piano. But I could take this, like for example, that motif right there, I can literally plug my MIDI cable from this into that, and this will follow the keys on that motif. So say you have like you're a smaller church, you have like a more meager keyboard. If it's got the MIDI round cables at the end,
yeah,
you can add pads with this. But you don't have to connect it and layer it either. That's one option.
Okay.
The other option is don't even like plug it in and just use it with your left hand if you have a bass player.
Yeah.
So you can just get one of those little, like they have like those little mini stands that sort of puts the synth on top of the keyboard. Yeah, you could be cooking with fire then, so.
Very nice. Awesome. Last thing for this video, any additional resources? So you're mentioning the Sound on Sound tutorial about how synthesizers work top to bottom. Any other recommendations for where people should go to learn more?
I will say I'm a fan of Reddit. Obviously, you know, take it with a grain of salt because, you know, Reddit can be almost like the Wild West sometimes.
Very much so.
Yeah, you can go on Reddit and ask questions on their various subreddits. There's that masterclass, again, his name escapes me, but it's Hillsong's main keyboardist, and he has a lot of stuff on that masterclass. I'd strongly recommend watching his masterclass. And then there's like, let's see here, the videos from Sound on Sound, Sonic State videos on YouTube as well, but they mainly do reviews. And then from there, it just depends.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, YouTube is actually a good resource because if you don't have a synth, there are people on there that'll just sit there and like record just how every patch sounds that it comes with. That's amazing, actually. Because you can just sit there and listen to, oh, that's how it sounds, right? Mm-hmm. Or like listen to people making music with those patches, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it can totally be done. Resources. Because I'm using Roland, though the other resource I have is Roland Cloud, I have to bring that up. With the big synthesizer I have, there's like, the thing is, I'm gonna like try not to be an advertisement, but there's this concept called plug outs. The System 1 has one plug out. You heard me use the Pro Mars plug out. A Pro Mars was a synthesizer Roland made in like 1979 or something like that. Plug outs basically allow you to have one or more slots on your synthesizer that simulates one of those, and you have 64 patches for each of them. So, for example, the System 1, I usually keep the ProMars on here, so I have a button that says System 1, which is like the native mode where I'm playing like the pads I was playing. Hold on. Like I'll be in here, but then I can switch over to ProMars and be, you know, like I was showing. You know, if I want to. But that's just like the System 1 has only one, and they're monophonic, which means you only get one note. So if you want leads, like you can get the SH101 plug out for this, and like you can sound all old school techno all you want. It's great. But then, and especially again, Phil Wickham. So,
right.
But then on the System 8, see on the System 1, there's a VST. You have to be a cloud member to have it. You can purchase it outright, but basically to bring it into your DAW and do like the librarian stuff and like manage your patches, you'd have to basically have that VST. They used to offer it for free, but now it's not. Okay. So like a rolling subscription of maybe like roughly 20 a month. It might feel a little bit steep, but the thing is, once you've downloaded the patches you need and you're done with it, you don't have to hold on to it forever. So if you've loaded up your System 1, and then there's a guy on the internet, like One-Eyed Cat or whatever his name is, he's got like loadouts for these synthesizers that work great in church. I'd strongly recommend picking up some of that.
Okay.
The IRO website has even more patches for the System 8. But then the System 8, though, you basically have to have a subscription because all of the VSTs, the System 8, Juno 106, Juno 60, Jupiter 8, Jupiter 4, JX3P, all those old vintage synthesizers, to use the librarians or the VSTs, you have to have that, that subscription. But the System 8 has 3 plug-out slots. So you can just sit there, like mine is loaded like the stock, which is Jupiter 8, Juno 106, JX3P, all 3 of those synths. So I have like 256 patches or whatever it is that I can use at any time in church. And then on top of that, they all have, like, they just came out, for example, with a patch set for the System 8 just recently. Like Roland is still developing this, patches for it. So with that, it depends on, I'm trying not to get too far into like, you know, being a Roland advertisement, but just know that like some synthesizers have an online system that you can use. Some of those require a subscription, some don't. It depends. For what you're getting in terms of like all the vintage synths with a System 8, 1,000, you know, maybe $1.5 grand is like a steal for what you're getting, but you have to have a subscription. They give you benefits like lifetime keys, so eventually like I won't need a subscription, I'll have all the lifetime keys, but it's still something to like keep in mind that you might need to do.
Sure.
But if you like load up for just 1 month, like just load everything up for just 1 month, you'll have more than enough patches to keep you busy forever. Yeah. And there's an SD card on this that'll allow you to store more patches. So that's something to keep in mind with synthesizers, okay. How do I store synthesizers? These are questions you need to ask before you buy. How do I store patches? In this case, SD card, but you need a subscription and a DAW in part. Some synthesizers, there's no online system. Some of them, like Nectar, like the Nectar Pacer foot pad I use, that actually, like someone created like a for free website that's built into Chrome that you just plug it in and the website understands MIDI. You can use it as a librarian and like modify the parameters.
Nice.
It just depends. Everything's different. Some synths don't have SD cards or any of that. Some do. Some need the online system. Some don't. These are all things to take into account. And it can feel like a lot of stuff, right? It can feel like dizzying how many things you have to think of.
Right.
So
no, that's fantastic, and it's all worthwhile information that goes into making that choice. So fantastic. In our next video, we're going to get a little hands-on and talk about starting from scratch to make a sound, just going from brain to physical touch. And then in our final video, we're going to talk just a little bit about controllers. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.